Using as a title for my sermon to support that theme, what are you for? It's a question. What are you for? F-O-R. What are you for? Just for the sake of the sermon, I want to lift up Romans, the 12th chapter, verse 3 through 5, and John, the 13th chapter, verse 6 through 10. Romans 12. For by the grace given me, I say to every one of you, do not think of yourself more highly than you ought, but rather think of yourself with sober judgment in accordance with the faith God has distributed to each of you. For just as each of us has one body with many members, and these members do not all have the same function, so in Christ, we, though many, form one body, and each member belongs to all others. John, the 13th chapter, verse 6. He came to Simon Peter, who said to him, Lord, are you going to wash my feet? And Jesus answered, you do not know what I am doing, but later you will understand. We'll stop right there. How does that sound? God's word for God's people. Thanks be to God. Howard Thurman, one of my favorite theological scholars, once said that at the core of every person, there is a sea. And in the middle of that sea, there is an island. And in the middle of that island, there is an altar. And before the altar stands an angel with a flaming arrow that does not let anything get to that altar unless it has the mark of your personal authority. In other words, Howard Thurman was saying that unless you and God worked in concert together, nothing could get to your inner altar. Your inner altar is a special place just for you and God to occupy. You can't just let anyone or anything approach that which is special between you and God. Your inner altar is a place where precious prayers and petitions and projects are protected and preserved for the uplifting and the empowerment of the kingdom. Our inner altar houses and cultivates our individual calling and our charge to be completed for the greater good. Today's theme, The Best Is Yet to Come, is a declaration that speaks to each of your individual inner altars and summons forward from them all of your calling and all of your charges and all of the collective programs and ministries and outreach and missions that you have to do individually and collectively for the community. By seeking to really work for the best yet to come, it will thrust you to the forefront of service-based mission and ministries that will cause this church to be an example for others in the community and around the country. If the best is yet to come, then there are things that must be placed on your individual inner altar. If the best is yet to come, there are obstacles and burdens that must be dealt with as you traverse the inner sea of your life. There are strengths and opportunities that must be developed so that you can build character and endurance and place whatever is necessary on your altar. So with that being said, our objective today is threefold. One, I want to encourage each and every individual seeker in the house to be more missional in your life by building your own inner altar. Two, I want to implore you as a church body to work collectively to define, redefine, and organize your collective church ministry and calling. And lastly, I want to inspire you to utilize your gifts, your talents, this space and resources to actually do what you say you are called to do, and thus find and encourage other seekers to unite with the fold as you seek to serve as a life-saving station. If we use Howard Thurman's illustration, a person, a seed, and an altar, then we must understand that each of us has a very precious something inside of us that God gave to us. That our altar, what is our altar? Our altar is the very nucleus of our God walk. Everyone has an altar. It is the pulse, the lifeblood, the center, the beginning, the foundation. It is special. It is unique. We have to contemplate in it, and we have to care for it, and we have to look after it and sit in it. Even if you don't recognize or acknowledge it, you have an inner altar. When you need to take a break, you never been somewhere you need to take a break? You just need to, just 3 seconds. Just get out of my face for 3 seconds, right? We're going to our inner altar. When you pull up in the driveway or the garage at home and you're not ready to go in yet, you're in that inner altar, just clearing your mind, just to get ready to go in. Sometimes it's in the shower. Sometimes you sit on the floor. Sometimes you sit on the porch, on the deck, even the toilet. But when you need to go to that special place that only you and God occupy, you're at your altar. Sometimes we have to step back from the world and our brain and our problems and our worries, and we stand before our altar when it's just us and God. But don't let your altar or your gift or your calling or your relationship with God give you the big head. Because the Bible says, do not think of yourself more highly than you ought, but understand that with faith, God has distributed this stuff to everybody. And so church people make me mad sometimes because they think that they're the only ones that have that special connection with God. They think they're the only one that can write the check, the only one that can sit in this pew, that can cook this thing, that can make this declarative statement. But I can proclaim with Pauline arrogance, do not think of yourself more highly than you ought, because everybody got an altar. And if you don't use yours right, God will elevate somebody else's to do the very thing God asked you to do. Yes, you are special, and yes, you are great in the eyes of God, but so is everybody else. And so we have to understand that our altar is precious to us, but it doesn't give us the right to downgrade or degrade anyone else's altar or anyone else's work or anyone else's calling. Just for the body has many members, and these members do not all have the same function. So in Christ, though we are many, form one body. If the best is yet to come, my brothers and sisters, we have to work on building our inner altar. So what's on our altar? It's that which is needed to support what we are for. What do I mean by that? What are you for? It's a tough question because we live in a world, especially a country, that spends a lot of time talking about what we are against instead of what we are for. But what are you for? What speaks to you? What do you stand up for? What do you give money for? What do you work for? What do you get out of bed for? What do you breathe for? It's easy to stand against something because to be against something, you have no responsibility but to complain about it. And then you can sit down and be satisfied. But when you are for something, you have to work for it. You have to pray for it. You have to challenge yourself to get off of your behind and do something about it. What must I do to help, to serve, to change, to empower, to alter, to build, to reduce, to expand? What are you for? What is valuable to you? What means something to you? I talk about in my book, I talk about getting pulled over by the police. Pulled over by the police. I was about 21, 22 years old. Went to the company Christmas party. My friend, colleague, who happened to be white, neighbor, we live next, really close to each other. He said, I plan on drinking. You don't drink. I want you to drive. I said, okay. He said, I don't want to get pulled over. I said, all right, I got you. So we drive to the holiday party. We each got 3 drink tickets. I gave him all 3 of mine. He bought a couple more. And so he was feeling real good, right? We left the party, we get into the car, it's the holiday party, I'm thinking I'm cute, got a nice little turtleneck, got the jacket on with the suede patches, and we get into, I had an old school Mercedes at the time, we pile in, and we're driving home, and the police officer pulls up next to us. I look him dead in the face, and I tell my colleague, uh-oh. We're about to get pulled over. He said, well, we didn't do anything. I said, I know, but we're about to get pulled over. He said, well, we didn't do anything. I'm the one drunk. I said, I know, but we're about to get pulled over. We get pulled over. He says, oh, I thought your tags were expired. My birthday's in June. This is December, right? So I don't know how he thought they were expired, but it is what it is. We sit there. He asked me questions about the car, give him my license back. 45 minutes later, we're going home. And my colleague said, what just happened? I said, you were riding with the black man in a Mercedes at night, and we were going home. That's what happened, right? Fast forward to 2 weeks ago. I'm in rural Tennessee. Car pulls behind me. I get nervous. The lights are flashing. I'm nervous. Petrified. I haven't done anything wrong. Petrified. Because I'm in the middle of Tennessee on a country road, and I'm like, oh my God. But the sheriff is really nice. I was in a rental. He says there's a ticket attached to it. Make sure you tell the rental car people. I said, okay. Thank you, officer. He says, all right, have a good day. And so what am I for? My life work is to liberate the mental, physical, emotional, psychological bonds that plague underserved, undervalued, disenfranchised populations. Black, LGBTQ, and otherwise. Why? Because I don't want my niece's generation or the next generation to be petrified when they see the lights. I grew up, my father's a cop, so I have no fear. I grew up around cops. But there's still that very real fear, because I live in a country where a young black man armed with a hoodie, some Skittles, and an Arizona tea can be killed, and his murderer get off and sell the gun that did it. And so what am I for? Making sure that one day people don't feel what I felt. And so my question to you, beloved, is what are you for? What makes you cringe? What makes you angry? What makes you cry? What hurts your feelings? What do you want to change? What do you want to improve? What is on your altar that will give you the tools necessary to change the world around you? And understand that whatever is on our altar, 3 things you have to do to get it to your altar. 1, silence. You have to learn to be still. Too often we don't spend any time with our altar because we're so busy talking. So busy watching Judge so-and-so, so busy listening to the verdict, so busy watching Law and Order. Sometimes you don't even pay attention, you just keep it on while you go through the rest of your life. Silence, stillness, meditation. Next, if you want to figure out what is on your altar and how to get it to your altar, surrender. That it's not just enough to be silent, but are you tuned in to God? Are you tuned in to Spirit? But what I really want to talk about when we talk about how does it get to our altar is service. What is your calling, and what are you doing about it? We're all familiar with the scripture we read earlier, Jesus washing his disciples' feet, right? That Jesus was teaching them how to be servant leaders. You see, it's not just enough to have an idea, a desire, or a want to help somebody. but what are you doing to actually help and fulfill that which you feel compelled and called to do? Jesus had to set a precedent. Jesus had to show that ministry was different than the way that the world thinks. You see, many people think that the Christ should be esteemed and honored and exalted and not have to worry about the menial task of washing his own feet, let alone somebody else's. But when Jesus stood up and took off his outer robe and tied a towel around his waist and bent down and picked up a basin and poured water into it and walked over to Simon Peter and humbled himself to wash the dirty, muddy, sweaty mixture that was between his toes, Simon asked a very shocking question: Lord, are you going to wash my feet? In other words, you are Lord. You are the Christ. You are the Messiah, the chosen one, the Alpha, the Omega, the door, the Rose of Sharon, the Prince, the Lion of Judah, the bright and morning star. You are the stone that the builders rejected that became the chief cornerstone. You are Jesus. You walk on water and give others the opportunity to do it. You are the one who calms the sea with your word. You are the one that feeds 5,000 with just a little bit of this. Even your DNA and the spit have the power to give sight to the blind. At your word, the lame walk, the deaf hear, demons tremble and flee. Even when we touch the bottom of your clothes, 12 years of pain and affliction immediately dry up. And so you, Lord, are really going to wash my feet? I'm not worthy. You see, we live in a celebrity-driven world. If Oprah, Beyonce, and LeBron James walk into a restaurant right now, the owner of the restaurant would say, "No, your money's no good here. You don't have to pay. No. Just tweet about it. Just thank you for coming in." But if a homeless single mother goes to the same restaurant and says, "I can't feed my child," we live in a world that would tell that broke mama no, but a billionaire yes. Jesus was teaching his disciples the same lesson that Maya Angelou taught us, that we are all human, and that no one human can be more or less human than another human. In other words, Jesus says, I may be God in flesh, but I am here to work with you and beside you, and I am here to teach you that just because you know me doesn't mean you are better than anybody else. So if I, your Lord and teacher, have washed your feet, you also ought to wash one another's feet. For I have set an example that you should do as I have done to you. For very truly I tell you, servants are not greater than their masters, nor are messengers greater than the one who sent them. And so preachers have forgotten all about that word. You can tell a preacher can't even carry his own Bible no more. Jesus had to teach them how to serve. And so my question to you is, individually, how are you serving the world from that which is on your altar? We have to work. We have to do something. I'm almost done. In 1938, W.E.B. Du Bois returned to Fisk University 50 years after he graduated. And he gave a message, a commencement address entitled The Revelation of St. Orgny the Damned. He used a fictional account of St. Orgne, O-R-G-N-E, an anagram for the word Negro. And he used St. Orgne to talk to the Almighty about various aspects of American life in 1938. And he used St. Orgne to talk to the Almighty to find out, how can I help with poverty and discrimination and illiteracy and many other aspects. But when the Almighty talked to St. Orgne about the church, the Spirit challenged St. Orgne to tell the church to stop being concerned with dogma and start being concerned with helping people to be right and to do right. To stop focusing on buildings and being entertaining and raising money, but to build people's character, to teach them to be kind and to help them to be happy. St. Orgne built a church that didn't just preach the Bible, but taught Shakespeare, Jesus, Confucius, and the social justice activists of the day. He established a church that not only had worship services, but had a co-op store, a school. It had an in-house physician, a dentist, a nurse, a library, trained lecturers, radio programs, movies, art, a retreat farm. In other words, even in 1938, when churches were full, Du Bois was challenging us to think beyond the walls, to think beyond what church ought to be or should be or used to be, and to focus on not just ministering to the soul of a person, but the whole of a person. And so service is ministry, moving from thought into action. When you take that which you are for and you establish ministries and activities and programs. And so when I say that I am for the liberating of the mental and physical, emotional, psychological bonds that plague underserved, undervalued, and disenfranchised people, it's not just enough to say that. But I made sure that my church started mentoring programs and fatherhood programs and scholarships and after-school programs, and I volunteer here and I give money there. It's not just enough to be for something and keep it on your altar for yourself, but what are you doing to help somebody else? And so my question is, if the best is yet to come, what are you prepared to do? What do you need to start doing? What do you need to stop doing to get ready for it? In 1993, Leighton Ford released a book, Transforming Leadership, Jesus' Way of Creating Vision, Shaping Values, and Empowering Change. And he talked about a life-saving station on the dangerous shore of life. Once upon a time, there was a dangerous shore. And as boats approached the shore, the rocks and the jagged edges around the shore would attack the boats, would harm the boats, and many people drowned. Before they could make it to the land, many died. And those who did make it were like Paul in the book of Acts, hanging on to the broken pieces of their boats. And so when they did make it to the land, they were beat up, they were bruised, they were dirty. They endured hardships on the dangerous seashore of life. Finally, a group of folk that had survived said, you know what? We need to do something about this. We may not be able to change the shore, but we can help the folk that are out there drowning. And so they bought a little raggedy boat and they went out on the dangerous shore and started saving lives and getting people into their boat and bringing them onto the shore and feeding them and cleaning them up. And then one day, one of the folks said, you know what, we really need a building, so that when people come, there's some shelter that we can take them to. And so they put up a little raggedy building. And they kept saving lives. And eventually more people got saved. lived. And the little raggedy building said, this ain't big enough for all the saving that we're doing. And so they needed to expand, and they put in a fellowship hall, and they put in showers, and they put in offices so that when they saved folk, they could take them through the proper administrative channels. And one day, one of the folks said, you know what, we really can expand this thing. And they put in a beautiful edifice with nice showers and nice stuff in it. And then they bought more boats and saved more lives. Until one day the folks said, we got this big pretty building, and we keep letting all these dirty folk out of the water into our building, and they messing it up. So why don't we put some showers on the outside so that we can clean them up before they come in? And then one of the members said, you know what? Why don't we put in a deck around the building, because the seashore might be dangerous, but it's so pretty, and we can have barbecue and sip cocktails and watch the sunset on our new deck. Until one of the members said, you know what? Keeping this building up and going is a lot of work. We need to hire some folk to save the lives, so that we can focus on this building and the administrative responsibility of managing the staff of the life-saving station. Until one day a group said, hold up, wait a minute, we've gotten away from saving lives because we got this building to take care of, because we got these bills and boat payments, and we've forgotten that our very job is to save folk on the dangerous seashore of life. And so at the board meeting, the president said, but I was born and raised in this life-saving station. My mama helped to build this life-saving station. I've been giving and working in it all my life, and so this is the way we do it here. If you don't like it, go start your own. And so they marched out, 5 or 6 of them, bought a little raggedy boat and started their own life-saving station. They put up a little raggedy building. They started growing, bought more boats, put in a big pretty edifice, put a deck around it, had barbecue, sipped cocktails, and watched the sunset, until somebody said, wait a minute, we've gotten away from the very thing that we're supposed to be doing as a life-saving station. So they marched out, they bought a raggedy boat, they put up a building, they started saving lives. They grew, they got a deck, and said, wait a minute, we sipping more cocktails and eating more barbecue than we are saving lives. And so the next group marched out, bought a raggedy boat, put up a building, built a deck. And legend says that all up and down the dangerous shores of life, there was a life-saving station on every corner, and people still drown each and every day. You see, too often churches forget that we're supposed to be life-saving stations. Too often we forget that life is still a dangerous seashore. Too often we forget that folk are barely hanging on by the broken pieces of their lives. Too often we forget that our very testimony is that we were sinking deep in sin, far from the peaceful shore, deeply stained within, sinking to rise no more. But a life-saving station reached out to us, cleaned us up, and took care of us. We forget that the master of the sea still hears despairing cries. We forget that that love that lifted us when we were drowning is the very love that people need right now on the dangerous seashore. But my question is for the church, every church, what are you working for? What are you building for? What are you raising money for? What are you buying boats for? What are you hiring staff for? What is it all for? What is the bulletin for? The bulletin board for? Everything that the church does should support the saving of lives. If not, we're just all sitting on decks, sipping cocktails, and eating barbecue. And so what are we for? What is our ministry for? What is our work for? What are you starting? What are you building? What type of ministry work? Scholarship, after-school programs, self-esteem building, suicide hotline prevention, prison recidivism program, single mother support group, grief counseling, Alzheimer's care group. I could go on and on. But what are we here for? Are we sipping cocktails or are we saving lives? Bless you.